Good morning. My name is Xavier.
I'm Paul.
I'm Carlos.
And today we will be discussing the types of euthanasia and their effects on their legal consequences. So our guiding question was, should the type of euthanasia affect their legal consequences? And after several group discussions and continuous research, we came to the conclusion that yes, that different types of euthanasia should affect the legal consequences because of the unique components and qualities that each have. So some of the different types of euthanasia are active, passive, and voluntary. Active euthanasia is when one decides to use force or lethal substance to kill a patient. Passive is when the person, like a doctor or physician, does not do anything to prevent the patient from dying. And voluntary euthanasia is when the patient clearly states that he or she wants to die and the doctor fulfills the wishes. Some more types are involuntary, which is when the patient clearly states that he or she does not want to die, but the doctor disregards their wishes and kills them anyway. Indirect is when a patient is given medication to reduce the pain, but the medication has a side effect of speeding their death. And assisted suicide is when the patient asks for help in dying and the person puts them in a position to help kill themselves.
So to make it easier on our research, we decided to categorize them. So we started off with intentional. The two categories were intentional and unintentional. So intentional, we chose active, voluntary, assisted suicide, and involuntary. As Xavier stated, they are all intentional because someone takes an action to do something in order to kill someone. Whereas unintentional, it's the act of omission that someone does not do anything or does something that they won't necessarily know that it will kill them. So the legal consequences of intentional euthanasia are very similar to murder because they are in essence murder because someone is taking an action to kill someone, but there are different circumstances in which they can happen. So for active, it is similar to murder because the physician is taking an action to kill someone. But in voluntary euthanasia, even though the physician is still taking an action to kill someone, the person being killed has given and clearly stated that they want to die. And so assisted suicide is very much like this, but instead of just a physician, it's the person or patient who wants to die asks anyone to help, and the person who helps them puts them in a position in which they can kill themselves. Involuntary euthanasia is different because it is when the patient doesn't want to die or someone else doesn't want to die and then someone kills them for their own benefit. So this is like when, say, two people are going on a mountain road and they run out of food and it's in the middle of winter. So one of them, because they decided that they are both going to die out there, one of them just kills the other in order to put them out of their misery. It's to end the suffering, and it's not necessarily, even though they may not want to die, they're ending them for their own benefit.
Okay, so now for the legal consequences of unintentional euthanasia. The different types are indirect and passive. Indirect euthanasia is when a doctor gives a patient treatment to reduce their pain, acknowledging the fact that it will increase their speed of death. This act can be justified by the doctrine of double effect. The doctrine of double effect is a document that lists all the factors of an act to justify if it was indirect euthanasia. If the act falls under all the factors of the doctrine of double effect, it will be seen as unintentional euthanasia or unintentional murder. The second, passive, is when the doctor just simply lets the patient die or stops doing what is necessary to keep the patient alive. An example of this was when the doctor turns off a machine that is keeping the patient alive. This act can be justified by definitions of acts and omissions. So it's like if the doctor acts to kill the patient, he or she is a murderer. But if he fails to keep the patient alive, it wouldn't count as murder. Okay, so now these are some of the benefits and drawbacks of different types of euthanasia having different types of legal consequences. So a benefit would be that each case would address each type of euthanasia and the circumstances of which the act was committed. This will lead to further investigation to prove the innocence of a doctor or to provide evidence of a murder. The only drawback would be that there would be no simple answer if euthanasia is legal or illegal. So a state just can't pass a law on euthanasia. They would have to address each type of euthanasia, saying which ones are legal and which ones are illegal based on the circumstances. And these are
Alright, so can you describe how the content of the team's presentation was changed as a result of the group discussions, Xavier?
So in the beginning, we like before we discussed one another's findings, we thought that no, like the euthanasia is euthanasia and should not matter under what circumstances it was committed, like it's murder. But after coming to like group discussions and continuous research, we found that yes, so we changed our answer.
Okay. What is an example of a compelling argument from one of your peers, IRRs, that you did not include in your presentation, Carlos?
I didn't include, so my IRR was only on unintentional euthanasia, and one argument that Paul brought up was that intentional euthanasia would be the same legal consequence as murder. So we implied that in the TMP, and this changed our, as David said, it changed our answers of the different types. It made us distinguish the different types between unintentional and intentional, which made us think that there would be different legal consequences for each type.
Okay, so what was the strongest counter argument to your solution?
Probably the strongest counter argument was the fact that because our solution said that there are too many different types of euthanasia and too many circumstances in which they exist, that there couldn't be one overarching sentence for euthanasia. And so the drawback was that there was no overarching idea or sentence, and so that the individual cases had to be studied over hours and hours of work to determine whether or not a sentence could be applied, and or what type of sentence should be applied to the circumstance.
All right.